All right, do you remember HQ Trivia? So it was an app where at its peak in 2018 had millions of people logging in at the same time to answer multiple choice questions for a chance to win real cash prizes. But the secret wasn't just in the questions, it was the experience. The live hosted format, the time pressure, the shared countdown, the feeling of competing alongside a massive crowd. So today we're gonna build a trivia app that could actually go viral. But we're not just going to focus on code, we're gonna focus on game mechanics and product strategy, specifically the product strategies that have made the best trivia apps in history blow up. And listen, we're gonna build this in about 20 minutes using AI. So even if you've never built an app before, no worries. We're gonna walk you through the process and have you ship something today. Let's get into it. All right, so here's our game plan today. What we're gonna build is an AI-powered trivia app where you and your friends can test your knowledge on a very fun topic, the 2000s, specifically the early 2000s. And the AI is going to roast you based on how well you do. But here's what makes it interesting. Everything is generated by AI here, which means you can actually fork this product and make it about literally anything. Taylor Swift trivia, New York City subway trivia, Real Housewives trivia, whatever niche your audience is obsessed with. Now, here is the process that we're going to follow today. Step 1, we're going to build a UI in Lovable that includes the name entry, the trivia screen, the countdown, the leaderboard, just the front end first, no back end yet. Step 2, we are going to connect to a Supabase instance and actually set up the database. So this includes rounds, questions, and of course the scores themselves. Step 3, we are going to use Gemini to pre-generate trivia questions and create multiple rounds in advance. Think of it like scheduling the content for our product. Step 4, we're going to actually build an edge function in our Supabase instance where Gemini will roast you based on how you did. And finally, step 5, we're going to turn on synchronous mode so the rounds only happen at scheduled times. That's what's actually going to create the FOMO. All right, we have a lot of work to get into. Let's get started. All right. If you don't know me, my name is Sunny. I'm a serial founder now on my 4th startup, LightSwitch, where I'm CTO. I'm also a former senior engineer at Bloomberg and Shopify, and currently an adjunct professor at Columbia Business School, where I teach tech. Listen, I've been in the tech industry for nearly 15 years before AI, and I've made all the mistakes so you don't have to. And I'm here to help you make sense of this new AI-driven world we find ourselves in. Let's get started with our first step. All right, so first things first, we are gonna head over to Lovable and build out our entire UI before we even touch the backend. Now, here is what we need. We need a clean, fast interface because this whole game happens in like 20 seconds. So I'm going to give Lovable a super detailed prompt. Let me actually paste that in here. Let's actually take a look. Build a live trivia speed game UI in the following screens: the welcome screen, the name entry screen. This is where we actually ask the user for their name. The game screen, the actual questions, and then the results screen. The aesthetic is going to be 2000s internet nostalgia vibes because this is testing for 2000s. Make the timer visible and almost anxiety inducing. We want to create that high pressure situation. All right. So now that we put that into Lovable and Lovable is cooking, this is probably a good time to talk about a misconception that I'm seeing with a lot of builders out there. You know, most builders think products win because they have the best features or even the most accurate data or just the most polished. Like if you build something technically superior, users will come. Well, history proves that's not always the case. Again, looking at our HQ Trivia example, they achieved major success because of live energy and FOMO. People showed up because they didn't want to miss out. And there are other products that achieve success for that same reason. Products like QuizUp and Kahoot. Here's the thing. Successful products aren't just tools. They are emotion machines. They make people feel smart, competitive, embarrassed, excited, or even chaotic. So as we build this, we're not just thinking, does this work? We're thinking about, does this create a moment someone wants to share? Does this make someone feel something? That is the difference between an app that people use once and an app that actually spreads. All right, let's see what Lovable has completed. All right, this looks pretty freaking cool. Here's like the leaderboard. This is basically telling us that we now currently have a new round. Let's actually play the game. Okay, when was the iPhone released? I'm just gonna click around here. I'm not even gonna attempt. Cool, this is awesome. And we have a roster here. Of course, this is all hard-coded data. We need to set up our backend and actually add in real content, but the UI, I think, looks pretty freaking fantastic. All right, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and connect this to our backend. Now, you have many options here. Lovable has their own backend service as well, but we're gonna stick to Supabase. We've had a lot of success with it in the past, so if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna click this little cloud button up here, and then I'm gonna click this, already have a Supabase project question here. All right, so I'm gonna hit continue, and then I'm gonna scroll down, and what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna go ahead and create a new project here. We'll call this Trivia App. Cool. And what this is going to do, it's going to create a new Supabase project in Supabase. Once that's done, we will then connect this to our Lovable project. That's a very important step. So I'm going to go back to Lovable, find the project, and you'll see that I have this Trivia App right here. And now we're connecting our Supabase instance to our Lovable project. But we're not quite done yet, because just because we have our Supabase project, we need an actual database structure. So here is our Supabase project. You'll see that we actually don't have any tables or anything. So we're gonna go ahead and set up our tables. I actually already have a pre-prepared prompt here. So this is what I'm going to say. Set up the tables. We have our rounds table, our questions table, scoring table, and so on. And we're going to connect it to our front end. Cool. Let's give Lovable a moment to complete the backend setup. Okay, so it looks like Lovable, it wants to actually make changes to our database. So as always, when Lovable needs to make changes to structural changes to our database in Supabase, it will actually ask us for permission to do so. So we could read through this, but this generally looks correct to me. Creating a questions table, creating a rounds table, creating a scores table, and so on. This is pretty consistent with what I just created. So I'm going to click allow. Okay, so it looks like Lovable is done. Let's actually go back to our backend and just refresh the page. All right, looks like we have a questions table, a rounds table, a scores table. Fantastic. But now we need to actually generate the questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do exactly that. I'm going to go back to Lovable, and we are going to generate these questions. But we're actually going to use Gemini to do that, because I find that Gemini is particularly good right now with generating that kind of content. So here is the prompt I'm sending to Gemini. Using Gemini AI, generate trivia questions about the 2000s. Here's some guidance, and let's go give it a go. All right, so it looks like it's done. It's essentially set up an edge function that we can then call in this admin page. And then when we click on this, it will call the edge function, which will generate the questions. Let's actually go to our backend. So what I've done is I've gone into this edge function section. This is the new function that we just created. If we look at the code, we're not going to get into too much details, but I just want to call your attention to a few lines of code here. So this is actually integrating with Lovable's AI platform. And then within Lovable's AI platform, it then calls different AI providers from there. So what we see here is the system prompt for the actual generation of the questions. And then we'll see that we're actually connecting to Google's Gemini here. So we're specifying that we want Gemini here, and then it'll generate the questions and then populate that questions table. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to go back here and I'm actually going to generate my 30 questions in the database. Okay, so it claims it's generated those questions. I'm actually going to go into the logs page right now and just to see if this has actually run. This looks correct. This timestamp checks out. But most importantly, let's go to our tables and let's click on this questions. And it looks like I actually have more than 30. I actually have 60. And the reason I have 60 is because when I originally prompted, it probably generated the first 30 and then I generated it again, which is fine. The more, the merrier. But it's great. We now have the questions. We can now move on to the next step. Okay, cool. So we have the questions, but now we need the actual rounds. So we need to create a couple of rounds that we can then test in our application. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back to Lovable. I'm going to paste this prompt. And then let's actually create, this is a typo, let's create the upcoming rounds in our database, select 3 questions for each round, create a new round. And then we want to test this game flow before we add the synchronous timing. The synchronous timing is basically where everyone can only play the same round at once, no matter who's using the app. We're turning that off for now for testing purposes. That way we can go in and test it. Let's see what Lovable does for us here. All right, so while that's running, I just want to make this point. We just generated like 60 trivia questions in a matter of seconds. I want that to sink in for a second because sometimes I feel like we get so lost in the sauce, right? 5 years ago, if you want to build a trivia app, you'd need to spend weeks writing hundreds of questions for your product. That was a major bottleneck for so many people. Content creation was damn impossible for so many. Now, AI could generate infinite amount of questions about any topic you can think of. But here's what that means. The skill that matters now isn't generating the content. It's actually curating it. What I mean by that is this. AI can give you 100 questions, but which 10 questions create the best experience? Which questions are too easy? Which questions bore people? Which questions are too obscure and frustrate people? Which questions create those shareable moments we talked about earlier? That's the human skill that's so important. That's what you need to develop. You know, as you build this out, I do not want you to just generate questions and ship it out. I want you to play your own game. Feel which questions work, which don't. Tweak the prompts, adjust the difficulty. That's the curation layer, and that is your edge because everyone has access to the same AI tools right now, but not everyone has the taste to know what makes a great experience. All right, let's move on. So let's actually play around with what we've built so far. So I hit join. My name is Sunny. I'm not even going to answer these questions right now. We'll actually do the game later. But okay, cool. So I just did the first 3 and everything works. That's awesome. Now though, there's still one more part, actually 2 more parts that we have left. The next part is that we want to fix up this roast logic. So I want to show you what's actually happening. So we click into our code and then we search for roast. You'll see that the roast messages are what we call hard-coded. So these are just fixed messages that are already there, but we want to make this even more fun, more dynamic, and we want to actually have this be generated by AI. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to copy this next prompt, paste this here, and what this is going to do, it's actually going to connect this to AI, so that way the roast message is generated on the fly. And what's cool, it's going to actually take into consideration the questions they got right, the questions they got wrong. So let's see what Lovable does for us here. So while that's running, I want to call one other thing out. Something that separates good games from apps that people delete after 2 rounds. And it pertains to the concept of difficulty level as it relates to game mechanics. So listen, difficulty should feel like reading the room. What I mean by this is this. If your questions are too easy, people will get bored, of course. But if they're too hard, people will feel dumb and they'll leave. You need some kind of flow, that sweet spot where someone feels challenged but not punished. And this is where AI can really change the game a bit, because in the old days, tuning that difficulty took a whole team of game designers to manually categorize questions. Now, of course, you can just tell Gemini to do that, and you could literally instruct AI, hey, this player is crushing it, make the next batch harder, or this player is struggling, dial it back a bit. In our app, we're going to do a very basic version of this with our difficulty mix. One easy, one medium, one hard question per round. And that's the kind of thing that used to kind of take months to build, and now it's literally just a function call. Okay, let's see what Lovable has completed for us. All right, cool. It looks like it's done. Let's actually kick the tires a little bit. Sunny again. All right. Okay, cool. It looks like we have actually an AI-generated roast here. Well, look at you, Miss or Mister. Top 8 fail. You got like 2 questions right, but hey, at least you have over 17,000 seconds to think about how wrong you were. Maybe use that time to Google MySpace. Just saying. Okay, so this is actually kind of hilarious. We've completed this step, and now we can move on to our next step, which is setting up the synchronous rounds. Okay, so before we move on, I want to make one other point. Listen, I just want to reflect for a moment. We just built this entire app in like 15 to 20 minutes. Generating the game mechanics was super easy. Generating the questions was super easy. Connecting it to a database, super easy. AI made all this incredibly trivial. So here's the big question. If building this has been made so easy, what stops someone else from copying your app in 20 minutes? And the answer is personality. Code is very easy to copy. Features, easy to replicate. But voice, tone, the specific way your app makes people feel, that's actually hard to copy. You know, with HQ Trivia, they had a host named Scott Rogowski, and honestly, that was 50% of why they went viral. People tuned in for his energy, his jokes, his chaos. The questions were almost secondary. So I want you to think of it like this for our trivia app. The trivia is almost like the theater. The host, though, whether snarky, supportive, chaotic, that becomes the real brand. So if you're forking this app to build your own version, don't just change the trivia category. Think about how you're going to add this hosting element. What's their personality? How do they talk? What makes them memorable? Because that personality layer, that's the thing that AI can't easily replicate for your competitors. That's your moat. All right, let's move on to the last and final step. So we're going to go ahead and make this more synchronous. As you can see, anybody can kind of play at any time, but we want to add that synchronousness to kind of add that FOMO quality. So here is what I'm going to prompt. Update the round system so the entire time gate, so there's like a time gated gameplay. We're going to check against the scheduled time, against the current time. There's going to be some welcome screen behavior updates to show that there's an upcoming round. We'll add an admin function so that way we can go ahead and schedule rounds. So let's actually send this over and let's see what Lovable does for us. All right, it looks like it's done. Let's click around and try to make sense of what has been accomplished. Okay, so first I actually want to go back to my backend. I'm going to go to my rounds table. This is the round that we were working off before. So if you see here, the scheduled time is December 6th, which is today, 1952. Right now it is 2017. So what we need to do is we need to create a new round. So when I go back here, you see here that it's waiting for next round. There actually is no round scheduled. So I'm actually going to go to my admin because that is where that edge function has been linked. So I'm actually going to do, what I'm going to do is I'm going to schedule the round for 1 minute from now. Okay, so it's scheduled for 1 minute from now. I'm gonna refresh my rounds table. You'll see that I have that in 1 minute at 2020. I'm gonna go back to my main page, and you'll see that the round is starting in 38 seconds. All right, let's wait and see. All right, suspense is killing me. Round starts in 1 second. Let's go. Let's start. Okay, Sunny for real, because I'm actually going to try to play this time. All right, what type of jeans notoriously low cut were a dominant trend throughout the 2000s? I mean, this is really freaking easy. Low rise jeans, obviously. Okay, what was the title of the breakout independent film from 2004 that featured Napoleon Dynamite? Napoleon Dynamite? Okay, these questions need some work. Which boy band? NSYNC. Okay, I officially won. Look at that, mister. I know everything from the 2000s. 3 questions, 3 correct answers, and a grand total of 0 seconds left. Dude, you're cutting it closer than MySpace trying to stay relevant. Love that. Awesome. So we did it. We built this entire product. All right, so here is what we just built. We built a synchronous trivia app in about 20 to 25 minutes with 20-second speed rounds, AI-generated questions, time-gated gameplay, and personalized roasting from Gemini. And we built the entire thing in Lovable in like 20 to 25 minutes. But most importantly, we talked about product strategy, the product strategy that actually makes apps go viral, emotion over features, personality as your moat, curation over generation, and of course, synchronous scarcity over asynchronous availability. Here's my homework for you. I want you to take this exact template and remix it for a community that you're part of. Change the trivia topic to something insanely specific that your community cares about. All right, if you stuck around till the end of this video, I appreciate you. I will see you on the next video.